Saddle up with your hosts of the Mainly Broncos podcast, Cameron Parker of PredominantlyOrange.com, Matty Mulls, and Mile High Sports' Zach Segars, as they break down the NFL with a mainly Denver Broncos focus.
Saddle up your horses.
Pitter patter, let's get at her. It is another episode of the Mainly Broncos podcast. So saddle up with us. We have another guest, and he's a longtime friend of the podcast at this point. It is Sayre Bedinger rejoins us, and we have the trio, the dynamic trio, not a dynamic duo, a dynamic trio of Zach, Matty, and I that will carry it as always with this podcast. So Zach, how are you doing? We'll lead it off first with you. How are you doing? How are you doing, I guess, with the snowstorm that's coming in? Because obviously I'm getting ready to kind of brace myself for it. I think the brunt of it's going to come on Sunday, but how's it looking down over there in Boulder?
I'm not in Boulder, unfortunately. I think they're getting it worse than almost anyone. They're getting 2+ feet. I'm down in southern Colorado, taking care of my parents' animals. We're still going to get 12-ish inches, I think 12 inches. But I'm not going to be snowed in. I'm not going to be trapped. So that'll be good. But yeah, enjoying it. I don't know. It's beautiful up here.
Matty,
how's it looking in Castle Rock?
Oh, I mean, I think we're supposed to get roughly around the same amount. I think the weather, the meteorologists have been so I guess spread out that they've decided that it'll be 12 to 24 inches. So no in between. So it's just it'll be 12 to 24. We'll just put these two numbers together. It's 12 to 24 and hope we're right. So we're expected to get roughly that amount. But see, then you got on the flip side, Sayre and Matty, who I doubt they have to deal with this massive snowstorm that we're about to get. I mean, Sayre actually may get some snow, I would imagine, because of the crossover, right?
Yeah, the tropical climate here in Nebraska. Yeah. So it's up in the air. I know we're supposed to get rain for sure, possibly some snow on Sunday, but I feel like this is a rare case where Coloradoans will be jealous of the Midwestern climate for maybe a day or two.
Or half a day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And is Matty bracing the flip-flop nature down there over in San Antonio?
I don't know. I might have to bundle up. We got a 50% chance of rain tomorrow a high of only 81. I don't know how I'm going to deal.
See, he says this stuff to make me jealous now.
75 on Sunday, and then 81, 84, 81. And oh, by the way, next week our pool in our neighborhood is opening. So
geez,
it's rough. You know what though, guys, I will bite the bullet and I'll live the hard life so you guys don't have to. So there we go. But it is going to be a hard life because I have to listen to you guys talk about Trey Lance a little bit. So I brought apple pie moonshine to kind of get me through the love fest.
Dang,
for him.
The Trey Lance hate from Matty. I wasn't
expecting that. I know. I guess we'll send it off to you, Zach, because this has been your boy for day one. Bracing the shorts and all. He's doing quite well down there in Fargo, North Dakota. He doesn't have to deal with, say, the snow right now, but I would imagine that he had himself quite a day. If we were to evaluate a pro day, he did quite well. But this has been your guy, so I'm going to give the floor to you, Zach, to talk about this pro day with Trey Lance.
I don't think there's too much to take away from the pro day itself. I think the only two things are, one, we saw some improved accuracy. I think it's also, we shouldn't read too much into that. He's playing against air, so I without pads or anything. It's just, I don't think we should put too much stock in pro days. He's a great natural thrower of the football. We already knew that. But it's nice to see some of those things refined and just some better habits built up through working with Quincy Avery. And I'm glad he kind of used his pro day to demonstrate he could work from the pocket because we already know he can run. I mean, we don't need to see that prove us that you can, operate from the pocket and beat the defense that way. And yeah, I like that. The thing I wanted to get into was a question Sayre asked me earlier. So really quick, Sayre, if you'll take that away really quick.
Yeah, so I'm just interested to know because I think the hype for Trey Lance has grown pretty big. It seems like, not many Broncos fans are talking about Zach Wilson, and I think that's because it's kind of assumed that he's going to be the second overall pick at this point, potentially. And there's some talk about Fields, but not a whole lot. But with Benjamin Albright, the good friend of the Mainly Broncos podcast, Benjamin Albright, I know he tweeted out that he doesn't think Lance is getting past number 4 to the Atlanta Falcons, which means he also believes that if you want him, you're going to have to trade up to number 3. So trading from 9 to number 3 is going to require at least our 2 next first rounders and then some, probably at least our second rounder this year, maybe more. You can put together whatever package you think would be realistic for that, or whatever that might be. So my question was, are you willing to give all that up to go get Trey Lance if he's the guy?
Again, if he's the guy, if that's Peyton's evaluation, that of these top 3, like he is the one. I'm not including Lawrence because like Lawrence is, that's not happening. One could argue Wilson's not going to happen. But if he's the guy and Peyton loves it, then I don't think it's too much. I think you can look at examples of teams believing in the guy and they trade a lot of assets. And even in cases where maybe we view it as like it didn't work out, like Wentz and Goff, like the Rams still got a Super Bowl appearance out of that trade, and the Eagles don't win that Super Bowl without giving up all those assets to land Wentz. So I think it would be worth it. In the spirit of the question, it's tough. Lance is the type of quarterback I would trade a lot for. But in this draft and in the reality we're living in, where I think the other 3 elite prospects are better fits in the system, and Fields, who I think is a much better prospect, or not much better, but I think he's markedly better and very talented in his own right and a better fit for the Broncos as well. You can get him for much cheaper. It sounds like his floor is the 8th pick with the Panthers. Maybe you have to leapfrog the Eagles to get to 5, but it sounds like the Eagles are putting all their faith in Hurts. So maybe you could trade up with them or 7, the Lions, to get in front of the Panthers. But if you can get Fields for a much cheaper value, I think that's a better prospect, better fit, further developed, almost just as much upside. I mean, you're splitting hairs at that point. And it doesn't matter when you're talking about someone that elite. So in this draft, no, but I love Trey Lance for so many reasons. And I don't think the fit with the Broncos is as clunky as some might think. I wrote an article on it, but people talked about, he needs time or the fit with Locke is weird. And I really don't think the fit with Locke is weird. You can treat it the exact same way you would, or you can go about free agency the exact same way you would with Locke, signing a veteran mentor, and then come the draft if Lance is available. Let's say miraculously he does fall to 8. You can draft him and then trade Locke for something. Who knows his value, but you can trade Locke away and then have that veteran mentor be the starter. And you could say, well, you want a different veteran mentor for Lance than you would for Locke, but I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't think you want a Tyrod or a Mariota because you don't need to teach Lance how to win with his legs. He's very, very good at that. You need to teach him how to win from the pocket, and that's what Foles, Dalton, Fitzpatrick, these same guys we're seeing listed over and over again, that's what they can mentor him with. And also that opens up the ability to, one, rest Lance, and then also incorporate him into the offense in a special package with quarterback-designed runs in an elevated Taysom Hill role, and he's a much better thrower of the football than Hill. So that, as well as I think you have Mike Shula on the staff, who, of course, has tons of experience with Cam Newton and whatnot. I think there's reasons to believe the fit is workable. Even if it's the least ideal of these top 4 quarterbacks, I don't think Shermer and Locke and maybe his need for time, I don't think those reasons are enough to dissuade me from drafting him. But I wouldn't. Matty's breaking open the moonshine.
I had to.
Would I trade 2 first-round picks? That would be my ceiling, not considering the fact that you can get Fields for much cheaper. The fact you can get Fields for much cheaper, absolutely not. I'd take Fields.
Interesting. So I guess the question, because you talked about it, it's a little bit hard to gauge on a pro day, right? I guess it's appropriate with it being a pro day theme and Matty, having his Oklahoma Sooners. So it's appropriate that, Zach got his wish with the Trey Lance pro day, and then of course, not to be outdone, Matty got his Oklahoma Sooners pro day today as well. I guess the appropriate question to ask is, how relevant really is a pro day? I mean, like, because it's like you can't necessarily, you can't necessarily know whether should we say it's evaluatable? I know I just made up a word there, but I mean, how exactly can we go about evaluating a pro day? I mean, is it more just the personal side of this? Like, I mean, as far as interviews and what have you? I mean, like, how exactly could we evaluate a pro day?
Well, I think that pro days are more important, last year and this year than they ever have been, because this is the first real chance that people have had a chance to have a face-to-face with some of these guys. There's a reason why Paton got on a plane and went to Fargo today, right? Like, he wanted to see him in person. There could have been a lot of this stuff going on at the combine had it actually occurred, but we didn't get that opportunity this year. So I think that makes these pro days that much more important. Some people probably went out to look at, Trevor Lawrence and all that stuff, but you knew what you were getting with him. Trey Lance is a much bigger question mark. And so you're going to have people like interested, and, I think you're doing your due diligence just to get out there and see a guy throw and maybe get to ask the guy a question or two, get to know his coaches, maybe ask a few of the players that are around, what they think. Did they go to his birthday party? All those kind of things. Also, there were 31 teams that went to the Oklahoma Sooners Pro Day. The only team that didn't have a representative was the Rams. And I think that's really important too. It's not just about the players that are coming out this year. There are relationships that are being built between organizations and schools. And if a school is a pipeline for talent coming into the NFL, that allows a team to become further entrenched. And maybe they're getting intel on a guy that's not coming out this year. But hey, what's up with Spencer Rattler? How did you like playing with that guy? Hey, Creed, what was it like snapping to him? Creed Humphrey, the offensive center. What was it like playing with him? What was it like playing in Lincoln Riley's offense? A lot of these guys are getting their brains picked too, because a lot of innovation happens at the college level. And some of these teams, like Shula, for instance, being out at a pro day, maybe that's something I can incorporate later. Should I be an offensive coordinator, or should I get the free reign? So there's a lot more than just going and looking at one guy lift weights and run, 40 yards in a straight line and seeing him do a couple of things in controlled conditions. Hell, a lot of guys look great in a pro day. Remember Paxton Lynch throwing in the whipping wind at Memphis, right? On a rope, like, man, oh my gosh, elite arm talent, right? Yeah, but, maybe digging a little bit more, you found out that he was more into the playbook in Madden than his actual playbook, so there is some good due diligence to happen on the actual players, but I think it's all those secondary effects and the relationship building that's even more important than just watching guys work out in shorts and no shirt.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead, Sayre.
Yeah, no, I just think that your guys are hitting the nail on the head, and football is so much, especially when you get a chance to see guys in person, you get to feel their speed. You get to feel their explosiveness, especially when you're down on the field level. And so I think that's part of what George Paton is talking about when he said that, he likes to evaluate QBs live and he likes to see them live, and he was talking about how he hasn't got the chance to see Drew Lock do that yet. He sees him putting in the work by showing up early and doing those things and being around the facility. But when you get to go see a guy do his thing, this is what Trey Lance has been preparing a almost literal year for, right? And so you would be stupid not to go see what has this guy been working on. Everything that we saw from him in 2019 was, electric. 42 total touchdowns, no interceptions, led his team to a national championship as a freshman, a redshirt freshman, and to do that at any level, deserves respect. It commands respect. And so when you have a guy who's been preparing for a full year for this pro day, it speaks volumes to the fact that you go out there, you honor that, first of all. And as a first-time GM, George Paton has to make sure when he goes into this draft, like you alluded to, Zach, this is a strong quarterback draft at the top. And if you're a new general manager, you coming into a team where you watch the film of every player and you dissected everything, you talked it over with your scouting department, you talked it over with your coaching staff, and you're like, all right, we see that there are things here that we like, but there's also inconsistency. So do we have a for sure answer at QB? The answer to that question is no, and so it's, you get those fresh eyes in there and you have a guy coming in, you got an opportunity in the draft at pick number 9. There's a chance, whether remote or not, there is a chance that one of those 4, or if they like Mac Jones, 5 guys will be there at 9. And so you have to make sure that you're positively sure that you don't want any one of them, or that you do. And if you do, like Zach said, what price are you willing to pay to go get them? Because if you decide that one of them is worth taking at 9, they're probably worth moving up for as well. So it's very interesting that this has all gone down, and that Paton was one of 9 general managers there, and he brought Shula with him, which is interesting. Brian Stark, which the other guy, the in-house guy who interviewed for our GM spot, was there. So, and apparently you're only allowed to bring 3 guys, so that's why it was just 3. But why those 3? What's the significance there? So, yeah.
And I think that's the dream 3. Like, one, the GM, Brian Stark, who might end up being that second in command, like you said, he was the in-house candidate. And then Shula, I think, if the Broncos were to select Lance, which I think is very, very unlikely, but if the Broncos were, I think Shula would be so important to his development, especially in that first year, incorporating some of those concepts, because you are going to want to use him some as a runner, and I don't think Shermer's ever shown that much in his offense. Not that I think he's unwilling to, but Shula has a ton of experience scheming those plays up, and I think it'd be great for Lance. But yeah, I agree with your overarching point about the quarterbacks. It should be about how do you evaluate these guys, and if Peyton thinks none of them are worth the 9th overall pick, he doesn't feel that confident in them, then yeah, I don't want the Broncos to draft a quarterback in that sense. If they don't believe in these guys, if they don't think they're talented, personally, I think they're all talented and I can't know what they're thinking, so I have to project my evaluation onto them. But if they don't believe in these guys, they shouldn't draft them. However, if they do, Pat Shurmur, Drew Lock, and a need to buy time or sit for a while, and maybe that not seeming like the Broncos are capable to provide that, I don't think any of those 3 reasons are enough to dissuade them from drafting a guy if they believe that quarterback talent could be the guy or is the guy, rather. I think you adjust your organization to fit the talent. That's what these smart franchises are doing today. You don't try to fit your young quarterback to your organization. And that's a knock on Shurmur you can apply to last season with Locke as well. He tried to fit Locke to his system and not the other way around. And I think that's just a very dated way of running an NFL offense.
Well, yeah, and I think that what makes it sometimes a little bit sketchy at times is, and to be completely honest, we saw it a little bit with Paxton Lynch, and it was just this sheer sign of desperation. And because, if you go back and we recap and we want to rehash exactly what happened that offseason, Colin Kaepernick should have been the Broncos quarterback, right? If we want to just kind of go, Colin Kaepernick should have been the quarterback. And so when all of that went down, there was a plan B. So maybe the first time in John Elway's, GM career, he had a plan B. But I would just say that, did it come to fruition? Yes, they ended up drafting their plan B. Was it maybe the right decision at the time of them getting Paxton Lynch? That's still debatable. But there was still that huge sign of desperation, because it was like, they traded back into the second round, they traded back to the end of the first round. You had no idea if they're going to end up actually getting their guy. And then you had the Cowboys who were heavily interested in him. And it was like maybe this full-blown panic mode that they ended up taking Paxton Lynch, because they had no idea, that the Chiefs were interested or heavily interested, or they knew that they were heavily interested and the Cowboys were heavily interested. So they ended up pulling the trigger on it, and it ended up backfiring on them. And it's going to go down as potentially maybe the worst move, should we say, in John Elway's career. And as far as a general manager. But I just think that if you're looking at a quarterback, you absolutely have to be aggressive. And I guess it goes back to what George Paton had mentioned. You absolutely do have to be aggressive, but there's like the being aggressive and being even keel while you're being aggressive. Like, you have to maintain that balance and not be so aggressive that you do something completely stupid. And I think that that's exactly where the Broncos have to be, is that if you have a guy in mind, then absolutely you have to do everything maybe in your power to go get him. But at the same token, be responsible about it, like a aggressive responsibility, or like aggressive, like responsible, I guess, or responsible aggressive. I'm trying to make up words right now, but it's not working. You guys get the point. But real quick, Matty, I wanted to give you the floor because Oklahoma did have its pro day. I want to give Oklahoma did have his pro day. So was there anybody? Oh, see, okay. First off, he's got to take his little drink of moonshine before he talks up his guys like Creed Humphrey and Ronnie Perkins, who probably fell to the 7th round today due to an injury.
Oh my goodness, Cam.
we.
Okay. So that the listeners can get a little bit of history about what happened today. Today is the day that we all woke up, and early in the morning there are reports that Nebraska was trying to back out of its game that's been scheduled.
Didn't happen.
Against the Sooners. Nebraska eventually went back and said new phone who dis with an update on their calendar for the OU game. So cool, welcome. We'll welcome you in Norman. You go home with a 40-point loss. We're ready for it. I'm here for it.
At least we get paid.
That's the whole reason why you left for the Big Ten, was for money. So and you're afraid of OU and the Longhorns, but that's fine.
And
that's
Iowa,
that's
apparently.
Neither here nor there. So here we go. There are several guys who were highlighted today at OU's Pro Day with 31 teams. Like I said before, everyone except for the Rams. There was not a quarterback on display here because, our quarterback was a redshirt freshman last year. So that didn't work. But a couple of standout guys that the Broncos could be looking at for depth purposes, Adrian Ely. He had a decent performance. He wasn't super explosive, wasn't super strong. He just had a solid performance there. There were reports, or some projections, late second, early third. I do think he probably fell to the 4th with his showing today, but he could be a good depth piece. OU has a really good pipeline for churning out offensive line talent. Creed Humphreys staying on that offensive line, kicking inside. Elite. He might be one of the best interior offensive linemen in the entire class. He would have rivaled any interior offensive lineman in last year's class as well. He was super explosive, 33 on the vertical, 29 on the bench press. He moved around really well too. I'm seeing him as a mid-second at the latest. He could slide up. If a team falls in love, you could even see him slide into the back end of the first round. It would not shock a lot of people. So super solid contributor there on an offensive line that featured a lot of talent at the quarterback position. During his time at OU, he started right away. So a lot of trust there, highly mature player, just gets his business done. Ronnie Perkins, I've seen him ranked as high as like 23rd on Daniel Jeremiah's big board. People weren't really talking about him, say 3-4 weeks ago, and now he's really picked up a lot of steam. Very much on the back end of the first round. I don't know that he gets much higher than 23, but edge really isn't a position that has a lot of top end talent. So it's all beauty is in the eye of the beholder there. He performed well. He did have, I want to say it was a quad or something happen when he took off for his first crack at the 40. He kind of eased up a little bit. He focused more on positional drills. There were like 6 teams that were focused on him directly in those positional drills. So a lot of those guys have picks in the back end of the first round, which is exactly where I expect him to fall. If somehow he does fall to like 40 for the Broncos and we pass on him, I will be livid. I'll need more than just a little apple pie moonshine. The guy is a stud. And then one of the guys that I'd really like to highlight that could be the best fit for the Broncos is Trey Brown. Seen him anywhere from late second, early third, when people thought he could run a 4.3, 4.2 potentially based on his on-field speed. He did underperform in the 40 with a 4.4 40 today. It's pretty weird. This is where we're at, saying a dude underperformed running a 4.4 40. But yeah, that's where we're at. He actually plays a lot faster than that. He was asked about it afterwards. He said it was probably a breakdown with his technique, and he didn't get out as clean as he wanted to. And that impacted his overall time. He was expecting to run in the low 4.3s and hopeful to run in the high 4.2s. It just didn't come to fruition. But if you watch him play, he definitely plays much faster than that. And we've seen that out of players, right? Jerry Rice, Antonio Brown, guys that run kind of a slower 40, and then you get the ball in their hands and get them on the field, and they're pulling away from everyone. They're pulling away from the guy who ran a 4.3 40. So, Trey Brown, I'm not too concerned about that. He did good enough in the shuttle, good enough in the cone, and the broad jump. I think he's going to be just fine. He had a 10.3 on the broad jump, so that was a pretty good to show his explosiveness there, quick twitch fibers, and his overall ability to run downhill if he needs to and impact things specifically in the flat. So I could see him in a man scheme. He would be really dangerous in a zone. I think he could do anything for Fangio. I think we could really get him late third, early fourth, potentially kind of in that range. So that's the breakdown for the Sooners Pro Day. What are you guys thinking with that?
I just want to really quick add to Matty what you said early on, and that I truly believe Nebraska is trying to play as few FBS programs as possible on an annual basis. So that's kind of where I'm at. But no, I agree with what you said about the draft guys too, man. I love Perkins. If he gets there to 40, that would be crazy based on what we're hearing lately. But Trey Brown, he would be fun. I think you could move him around the formation like you said. So I think that's good. And anytime we get an opportunity to dog on the Huskers, I'm in. I'm game.
I'm still waiting for the moment in time where I can beat not just Iowa, not just the Sooners, but apparently the Colorado Buffaloes now. I mean, we've been close like in the last like few times. Like I'm literally surrounded by like, your guys' teams that we can't even beat in college football. I mean, the only teams that we've ever gotten close to is CU. Because I mean, like Iowa, we will probably have like a close game like once in a blue moon lately, and then Oklahoma. Well, we have not even played Oklahoma in the past like, I don't know, 50 years lately. At least that's what it feels like. So, I mean, we won't know until, when they play, this upcoming year. So, I mean, I can't exactly say. Well, we will probably be losing by 40. You never know. But, I mean, I don't know. I can't exactly toot my own horn that Nebraska is a really good football team when we've got our best player transferring, and my, I guess self-admired Luke McCaffrey going to Louisville. So, I mean, me admiring Luke McCaffrey and everything. So I'm trying really, really hard to, like, I guess, accept defeat, and it's not exactly working. Let's just put it that way. Hopefully, speaking of, not accepting defeat, Zach's got a pretty fun exercise that he posed to us, and it's a fun one because I did a mock draft, Zach did a mock draft, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna pin our two judges, Sayre Bedinger and Matty Mulls, and they're gonna decide on who the true victor of this mock draft is. Now, granted, there is a little bit of some history, Zach, between Sayre and I, especially, to where he and I have called the correct picks the last, what was it, Sayre? The last, what was it, it was 2018. We picked Bradley Chubb, right? I mean, for the
right.
And then in 2019, we picked
Fant.
Fant,
Reisner, Locke.
No. You had Locke going to what was Oakland at the time.
Oh, did I?
But I mean, we had Fant, we had Reisner, and we picked Justin Hollins in that draft.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So there's some consistency brewing here with Sayre and I. So you may have a little bit of a hurdle on this one, but it should be fun nonetheless. I'm kind of curious to see what Zach's mock draft is.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be tough to win him and Matty over, I feel. But I didn't go quarterback in the first round, so I think that'll help me. I had that in mind. Lance was on the board, but I went,
okay.
If I take Lance here, I'm throwing this thing. So I'm elsewhere.
But I mean, should we go into it? I mean, should we send it off to our two judges and
sure.
And the both. Feel free, Matty. You can pick and choose whose draft you want to rattle off first. Let's start off with Zach's, I guess, if you want to rattle off Zach's, Matty, and then we'll have Sayre, since he edited mine. We'll have Sayre rattle off my.
Should you and I go through them, and we can make our case for our our mock drafts here as we go through the picks.
I mean,
guys. Yeah, you guys have to go
Matty
through them
and Sayre rattle them off. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, they're the judges. I think we're the lawyers, Cam. We gotta make our cases here.
All right.
So I'll let you close. I've got
good.
Starting off with the 9th overall pick. I went with Rashawn Slater, the tackle out of Northwestern. I think this guy's an elite tackle, and the arm length really doesn't bother me. I think that's like the one knock you could maybe come up with if you wanted to, but his arms really aren't that short. They're still 33 inches. That's like comparable to what Joe Thomas's were. You can have short arms and be a very successful tackle.
This dude's doing the Thriller out here in drills, but it's all right.
34 inches is standard, and he was at 33 or 33 and a quarter, something like that. I really don't think those, yes, the length matters. It should not prevent you from taking this guy that high. And if for some reason he doesn't work out at tackle, which I feel very confident being coached up by Mike Munchak, he'd be a Pro Bowl, if not all pro tackle. Worst case, you slide him in and he replaces Graham Glasgow and is a super elite guard. Moving on to following that Quentin Nelson mode. I mean, we look back now and we're like, oh, Quentin Nelson would have been a great pick. Even if we are happy with Chubb, Rashawn Slater could be just like that. Maybe not to Nelson's level, but not far off. Second round, I got Baron Browning. I mean, that's a dream fit. I loved seeing him at the Senior Bowl. Super athletic linebacker. And then everything we hear about his character is fantastic too. I think when it's all said and done, he probably goes first round. Maybe the back end of the first round instead of at 40. But if he's there, I think the value is unbelievable. In the third round, I got – wait, what was that, Matty? You go.
I was just going to say, where do you see him playing as far as backer? Where do you see him fitting for Fangio.
I would put him alongside Alexander Johnson. I think you're trying to add speed, and you already have that thumper in Alexander Johnson who can come downhill. I think their struggle is finding a lighter guy who can help in coverage with the matchups against tight ends and running backs. Of course, that's long plagued them, and then can also just be a more consistent coverage backer. I think Alexander Johnson's okay, and Jewell will make the right reads, but those guys can often get exploited as a mismatch, especially in this division. I think Baron Browning can help you with that stuff. And yeah, Justin Sternad might be able to too, but I mean, Browning's an unbelievable talent. If you can get him in the second round, I'd take him. And then I got really lucky. Richie Grant somehow fell to me in the third round at pick 71, which is unreal. I love him because I think that first season, while he's learning under Kareem Jackson, I mean, we talked about Sayre was talking about all these Kareem Jackson comps. I mean, Richie Grant's a perfect example of that. And I think he can play some cornerback in year one if you need him to. And I also wanted to do a mock draft through the perspective of signing 2 free agent cornerbacks, which we've seen speculated. I think that makes cornerback less of a pressing need compared to some other things. And so I wanted to see what happened without taking Caleb Farley first or something like that. Fourth round, I got Jalen Twyman, the interior defensive lineman from Pitt. Here's my thing. I'm happy to gamble on some of these guys that opted out due to COVID. I think Twyman's talent is a lot better than a fourth round defensive lineman. And I think you need depth. I mean, last time you were on, Sarah, you talked about the needs on the defensive line. And I don't know. I just think his tape's a lot better than a fourth rounder, and he's getting knocked down the boards because he opted out due to COVID. And while that makes him a bit more of a risk, it's not. He was projected in the second round this summer, and now we're seeing him in the fourth. I don't know. The COVID opt out doesn't bother me that much, especially when I have a need at that position. And the other option at that point in time was Marvin Wilson. And it's like Marvin Wilson had the bad season. We've known that for a fact. Twyman, I mean, worst case, he would have gone the direction as Wilson. So I was okay with that. Then I got, sorry, I'm going here. Ambry Thomas, the cornerback out of Michigan. I think he's a Bryce Callahan replacement. Patrick Johnson, the edge out of Tulane, a good developmental edge guy behind Miller. And then I traded 2 7th-round picks to get back up into the 6th for wide receiver Josh Imitor Bebe out of Illinois. I think I got that right. In case Tim Patrick leaves, he can be your downfield deep threat replacement. And he also can serve as Cortland Sutton insurance. And then with my one remaining 7th-round pick, I got Elijah Mitchell, the running back out of Louisiana. I think he can be that insurance running back. 7th-round pick, so he's super cheap. I think he's like a bargain version of Trey Sermon. I like Trey Sermon a little better as that long-term Melvin Gordon replacement, but you're going to have to take Trey Sermon in the 4th. In this simulation, I got Mitchell at the bottom of the 7th. I prefer that value. Sorry for the rant. That is my mock draft.
All right. Do you guys want me to give mine, or do you guys want to critique his and then I'll give mine?
I think that you should give yours, because us critiquing his might give away what we think about yours. And okay. I think it'd just be better to just line them up one after another.
Okay. All right. So for my sake of the mock draft, what I did is I did it as far as addressing defensive playmakers, and for the sake of, for free agency, they do add a corner. They don't add multiple. They may add, say, a second corner before training camp. But, I mean, I did it for the sake of they just decided to add a multiple as far as the cornerbacks go. But as far as the best player available and, say, the best position that they could possibly address with just pure, defensive prospects, I mean, there's really no other way you can go. And I went ahead and drafted potentially the best player that they could go with, and that was Caleb Farley with their first pick at number 9. And then with pick 40, I did not mess around. Obviously, Zach had mentioned, that he ended up selecting. It was Richie Grant with his 71st pick. I didn't mess around because I just didn't want to take that chance, and that he would be there at 71. There's been a few cases lately, where he may have been there at 71. So I just didn't want to take that chance, and so I ended up selecting Richie Grant at pick 40. And both those guys, and I'll actually talk about, say, the three guys that were the three top heavy playmakers of this draft. Because as far as their overall fit, Jabril Cox was my next one at pick 71. And so I believe that my whole point of this trio, should I say, and it's a really powerful trio, is I just love the idea of the playmaking ability of all of them and the ability for them to create turnovers, which has been something of a huge theme the past handful of seasons that Denver's defense has really lacked. And I think, and I think that with guys like Caleb Farley, who are instinctive, they're sticky, they have the ball skills to really make those types of plays, and you have a linebacker that has the type of interception capability like a Jabril Cox and the coverage ability, the sideline-to-sideline speed that Denver's not had. And I also was even foreseeing a future with Jabril Cox and Justin Sternad together, to where you have both speed and speed together. And if you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the linebacking core with Devin White and Levante David, both those speed linebackers, I mean, it was pretty impressive with the way that they were able to do that. So that was the way I was foreseeing that type of linebacker duo, was a Justin Sternad, Jabril Cox type duo. And then Patrick Jones, the potential there of the edge, a athletic guy who was most dominantly an edge guy. I believe he had only played his entire time at edge, but some people have been speculating that you could stand him up, maybe be like a versatile guy, maybe as like a outside linebacker in certain packages, and maybe drop him in coverage in certain types of situations as well. But he's athletic, and he also has shown the physical prowess to get to a quarterback and really create a lot of tackles for loss. And so I love the idea of getting, say, a pretty decent value developmental guy at pick 114. And then I went ahead and I got Brady Christensen, the offensive tackle from BYU. I think that, for one, it helps when you're blocking potentially the number 1 overall pick, or should we say number 2 overall pick going to the Jets, and Zach Wilson. But I think that, he was a true left tackle, but people with BYU, but people have been wondering athletically, is he even a true left tackle? And with all the questions that have been surrounding, Juwan James, and let alone the depth that the Broncos have at right tackle, it afforded me the opportunity to really kind of take that chance. And a guy that I think will project maybe early on as a backup swing tackle. And so I went ahead and got a Brady Christensen. Jamar Jefferson, this one was a little bit interesting and a little bit based more off of projection, that I think that for starters, I think it was more to push Royce Freeman than anything. I think that Jamar Jefferson has got a lot of that production that we've seen in college. He's very instinctual and at times a pretty physical runner. So if anything, when you bring him in, he will challenge Royce Freeman right off the bat. And so I think that, especially with the way that Royce Freeman has been, he'll challenge him. And I think that with his type of talent and the way that he is as a runner, I think he could project pretty nicely down the line in those short yardage situations. And I believe that he would fit really well to potentially, if they ever molded it into that as a starter down the line for Jamar Jefferson. I like his potential for him. And Cameron Bynum, going back to the cornerback room, I like the idea of adding physicality to this secondary. And when you add guys of a physical room, basically of a Sang Bassi and a Parnell Motley and a Cameron Bynum, and then now you put in a Caleb Farley, it makes the offensive wide receiver, should I say, just not fear you, basically. So I like the idea of getting Cameron Bynum there, and then Lorenzo Neal and Warren Jackson to round out my draft. And one little note that I wanted to say about Warren Jackson: not only is he a local guy, but who did the Minnesota Vikings select in last year's draft? They selected, I believe it was BC Johnson, the wide receiver from Colorado State. So there is some sort of familiarity still, not just local ties, but there is some familiarity with George Paton and this Colorado State underrated wide receiver university of guys like Michael Gallup and Rashard Higgins. There is now some uptick now lately with Colorado State wide receiver production that I think that Warren Jackson, he may not even be here. And I mean that in all honesty. He may not even be there, say, with that 248th pick at the final pick of the 7th round. He may be drafted a lot higher just because he's 6'6". He's 215 pounds. He's instinctive. He can catch at its highest point. His catch radius is pretty impressive, as you'd expect for a guy that's 6'6". I mean, the only knock is where is he on route running, which is funny because that was the knock on Tim Patrick coming out of college. I mean, you weren't sure necessarily where he would be. So if we're projecting, he would in essence be your Tim Patrick replacement if something were to happen to him down the line. So, and as far as Lorenzo Neal, he's more of like a true stash away pick for your practice squad, a guy that you could develop maybe potentially long term, a guy that he's clearly shown the ability to stuff the run when he's there and he's healthy. And so I just think that he would fit pretty well here. So yeah, I mean that's my no trade worthy, should I say, no trade worthy Cameron Parker mock draft.
Man, I gotta say, I can't believe neither of you drafted an Iowa Hawkeyes player. So immediately we're going down a letter grade with that one. But no, I'm just kidding. No, I think it's great stuff. It's funny. You both picked Richie Grant at different spots, obviously, and you both specifically went after Tim Patrick replacements on day 3. Which, we brought up Tyree Cleveland earlier, and he's there, and I think it's a good strategy either way. Get another special teams guy, a big body out there. I think that's kind of a no-brainer in this year's draft, and so I like what you guys did there. Both of you took day 3 running backs. I like it. You guys had you both had edges on day 3 early. Round 4 picks both, or you had Twyman in round 4. So, but and Patrick Johnson, the Tulane edge, is who Zach selected, and so I mean, my goodness, I don't know. Matty was talking about highest upside pick, and I think when I think of what's the highest upside pick, I almost immediately think, okay, what was the best, mid to late round pick? But I think the highest upside pick between the two drafts would have to be Caleb Farley, because he's the guy who's got the crazy athleticism, the rare size for the cornerback position, the freakish ball skills type of thing. To me, he's also the riskiest pick of the entire draft, just because I wrote an article about this a few days ago, but to me, and this is going to seem super hypocritical because I am all aboard the Rashawn Slater train, and I would love for him to be our top pick. He's on my shortest of short lists, so it's hard to beat a draft that has Slater for me. And my thing with Farley, yes, I think is the highest upside pick of either draft. But my thing with Farley is it's going to be over 650 days between football games that he's played when the time he steps onto an NFL field. And we're talking about a guy who just in 2017 transitioned from being a high school QB to being a high school wide receiver to tearing his ACL, and somewhere in the in-between of tearing his ACL and getting healthy, he became a defensive back. So we're talking about less than 3 years on task of playing corner, and then we're going to ask him to come in and play in the Vic Fangio defense, which obviously not impossible. This guy's an elite athlete. But to me, while you have the very high upside of a guy who is maybe the best in this draft at making plays on the football in the defensive backfield, you're also talking about a guy who, I mean, this guy, we're talking about a guy 4 years ago was a QB, and that's who he was coming out of high school, and just an athlete, a projection. So Rashawn Slater comes from NFL bloodlines, he's got NFL in his blood, and he's played both tackle positions in the Big Ten, and he's got tape shutting down Chase Young, and how many guys have that? So I almost toe the line between saying Rashawn Slater's the highest upside pick here, because you're getting a guy who has the best tape against arguably the best edge prospect to come out in the last, can we say, decade? I mean, that's pretty lofty praise, but Chase Young is definitely a transcendental type of player. So all told, I lean to the Slater draft because Slater's on the hashtag my guys. So I personally, I would have potentially gone a different direction than Browning in round 2, even though I like Browning quite a bit. And I love the idea of signing free agent corners. You know me, Cam. I wrote that piece on 12 guys, and I talked to Matty about the free agent corners as well. So that's where I'm at with it. I think the highest upside pick, I'll give that to Cam, because I think Caleb Farley at pick 9, I think he's the highest upside. I think you're talking about a guy who could pick off 8-9 passes in a season. But you also might be talking about a guy who plays on, 4 different teams in his first 6-7 NFL seasons, like good enough to play, but maybe not good enough to stick. So I think you got two sides of a coin there, and I love Slater a little bit too much, and that upside of him and Bowles at the tackle positions going forward, maybe kicking him inside to guard if need be. I think that's the class that I'd be most excited about.
So it was really funny, the wave of emotions that I saw on Zach and on Cam's faces. Like, they're like, yeah, he's talking me up. Oh, now he's not talking me up. He's talking the other guy up. And it was just really funny watching them kind of push out their chest and then retract and put their tail in between their legs. That was really funny. I don't know that I'm going to do as good of a job as that, but I certainly will try. So I, on the other hand, am not very high on the cornerback class in free agency that's available. It's more sizzle than flavor. It's more name than current production, in my opinion. Now, there are some guys that could potentially be diamonds in the rough, and I would ask you to go read Predominantly Orange to see some of those guys, because Sayre's done a great job digging into those guys. Maybe somebody from San Francisco who might be an interesting fit. But with that being said,
just to
I was teasing it. With that being said, though, looking at these drafts, right? I'll start at the top. We got Farley and we've got Slater. I'm really worried about Farley. I'm really worried about his long-term viability. I'm worried about his he's a great athlete. He does have a lot of injury concern. I think he relies on his athletic ability a little bit too much, and he's not as technically sound. There's somebody who might actually have a better career arc in the other draft, and he was drafted in round 5, in Ambry Thomas. I'm not holding it against him that he chose to go to the Wolverines over the Sooners, who also offered the 4-star recruit. But Thomas he's going to run probably high 4.3s, somewhere in there, probably low 4.4s. I don't know when their pro day is, but I think that's what they're talking about him running. But he's got great ball skills, elite ball skills, find ball, get ball. He's fluid in getting in and out of the breaks right alongside wide receivers. He's a guy who you can throw in the slot and he can cover the entire route tree. I like his upside. So we talk about high upside. Ambry Thomas could be potentially the best pick in the entire draft that Zach had. And you could potentially be looking at a perennial all-pro at right tackle in Slater. I made fun of his arms there, but if the Broncos got Slater at pick 9, their tackles are set. Right-handed quarterback, left-handed quarterback, like that right side is good to go. And the thing that really hurt Cam here was that he got his guy Grant at 40, but he could have gotten him potentially at 71. That automatically makes the value look worse. Browning's a guy that I've seen ranked all the way up to the beginning of the second round. Some people are in love with him and his ability at the linebacker, at that second level as a linebacker. Now, granted, where you're going to play him, like I don't necessarily know 3-4-4-3. It really kind of depends on where he lands there, but I think that's an interesting fit, putting him there kind of as a freelancer. He doesn't have to be the thumper in Fangio's defense. That's really interesting to kind of let him go and make plays. That being said, though, Jabril Cox, I think, is a really, really interesting prospect that Cam was able to get with that 71st pick. So it's almost like the Browning-Grant pairing versus the Grant-Cox pairing. I think it almost cancels each other out. I think Cox is a really, really interesting prospect that not a lot of people are talking about, or not enough people are talking about. But probably here in a couple of weeks, you're going to see him maybe rise up, maybe get into that second round. So good job by both of them there. Cox was fantastic. So that kind of gets me to the rest of the draft. I really like Thomas's upside. So I think, like, if you look at best case scenario for Farley, best case scenario for Thomas, the value in getting Thomas in the 5th round versus the 9th overall pick, like that's going to be pretty negligible for talent versus what draft capital you had to use. And Slater could potentially solve the right tackle problem that's been the Broncos' nemesis for so long now. As far as getting value at the back end, I like the fact that both of y'all went and got edge. I do like the Bynum pick at corner too, kind of doubling up there, helping out the secondary. But then again, Zach had the caveat that he signed 2 free agent corners, so it's not as an immediate of a need. And you really hope that Michael O steps up to the plate and develops a lot there. Zach, you want to chime in?
Yeah, just on the veteran quarterback thing, that's one thing I do want to mention just in this greater draft conversation. I don't think cornerback is as glaring a need as it's sometimes been talked about. The reason it got so bad last year was because of a crazy amount of ACL tears that shouldn't replicate itself. You've got Bryce Callahan, and yes, you need insurance behind him, but Bryce Callahan, Michael Ojemudia, and a mid-level free agent say Chidobe Awuzie or Akella Witherspoon in Vic Fangio's scheme that for the past decade has elevated quarterback talent, whether it be bad cornerbacks to playing mid-level or mid-level cornerbacks to looking a lot better than that. Kyle Fuller, for example, a good cornerback, was an all-pro in that scheme, and I think Callahan's another example of that. It's so cornerback friendly. I don't think they have to invest all these assets at corner. And that's kind of why I went Slater 1st round. I think they can hit some of these late round guys like an Ambry Thomas. Tay Gowan was another one I looked at while doing this mock draft. Elijah Molden, a guy maybe at the top of the 3rd round. He's been thrown around a lot. There are guys in mid-late rounds of this draft that I think the Broncos can target and get really solid production out of them, because Fangio's scheme is always going to elevate cornerback talent. And I think that's why I went with the tackle. It also just helps lockout, or if lock doesn't work out, whatever quarterback you throw in there is going to have the weapons and protection pre-made for him.
Rebuttal, Cam?
Nope. I'm taking it to the nope. I'm still letting the judges decide.
So overall, no, you're good, man. There is room for an argument and a rebuttal and a cross exam if either one of you wanted to put the other person on the spot. But I think you had very identical strategies kind of going in, and whoever you had available at 9 kind of redirected things. I think you both circled Richie Grant as one of your guys that you wanted to get. I just think that being a GM, Zach did a better job of getting the value there. However, Jabril Cox at 71 really was a great value too. And you could argue that maybe Jabril Cox is as good of a prospect as Browning. So like I wouldn't hate on that either. But I just think that the pick that set it apart for me was the Ambry Thomas pick for Zach and his upside and his ability. I mean, in the 5th round, he's a guy who I think could really see a very healthy second contract with the Broncos because he performed so well in the nickel. So that's kind of where I go. But it wasn't like you wiped the floor with him, Zach. Cam, great value with Cox. That almost pulled you through.
Okay.
Okay, Cam's like, okay, Matty, okay.
Okay. I'd say, see, now there's a good friend, but I don't know. That doesn't seem like a good friend to me. To quote Letterkenny.
Well, you quote Leonard Kenny a lot. That's what I appreciate about you.
Oh man, and it's again. What makes this so hard is we kind of transition to the other part of what we wanted to talk about was the direction of the team, right? I mean, like we have no idea what the direction of this team will be. I mean, we may have like say tea leaves or, should we say, ways that they want to go, like. For instance, they may take tackle with the 9th pick, right? I mean, we have no idea, in essence, where they're going to go, which sort of leaves this door open coming free agency because the tampering window is going to be open on Monday to where we will maybe see deals happen before Wednesday. So as we kind of like round out the show with something, that is... something that we're going to do a lot of discussing over at Predominantly Orange, with Sayre and I and a lot of the writers down there at Predominantly Orange. And of course with Zach too, over with, with Mile High Sports as well. Free agency will be, a big deal. And so with the legal tampering period that is beginning on Monday, I don't know, we'll certainly see what happens, but, real quick, I mean, if you guys are, and we'll do some predictions, of course, but I mean, if you guys are running the Broncos, we've done a few of this talking before about free agency before, but now with it officially, say, kicking off with air quotes on Monday, I mean, where do you guys start? I mean, we'll start with the guests of the show. Sayre, I know you and I will be doing a deep dive on this, but I mean, where do you start?
Yeah, I think defensively, obviously, is where the Broncos have to go free agency wise. Just thinking off the top of my head, not going back all the way. You could go all the way back to 2017. The biggest offseason moves the Broncos have made financially, they're on the offensive side of the ball, right? I mean, 2017, I believe Ron Leary was the highest paid free agent that we brought in. 2018 would have been Case Keenum, right? 2019 would have been Jawan James. 2020, Glasgow. But you could obviously split hairs there and look at the numbers of Casey and Boye, whatever those were in total. But overall, the biggest investment in terms of guaranteed dollars is coming on offense, right? And so this year it's got to be defense. In fact, since Vic Fangio came aboard, the top draft picks have been offense. So it's time to invest on his side of the ball. You bring in a defensive coach, you can't always just expect the guy to make lemonade with lemons, and speaking of the free agency period, I mean, what's the point of the legal tampering? It just makes the team's job on social media that much more difficult. Got to word things weird. But I will be excited to see some eyeball emojis from the Broncos account again this year, right? As things are about to happen. So then we'll know that something's about to go down. So, but I think it's a defensive defensive emphasis all the way. You know, I don't know if the Broncos called on J.J. Watt at all, nor that they really should have, because he's kind of in that mode where he's paid his dues. It's time to go to a team that's probably going to contend, which the Cardinals were an odd choice there. But, you know, what, to each their own. So, but I think defensive line, you know, Shelby Harris, he's not re-signed to a contract unless something's gone down on Twitter in the last, you know, hour or so that we don't know about. And frankly, like I talked about on our last, on the time previously that I was on the show, I don't really know where to peg Shelby's value other than I know he's good in the Fangio defense, but I think a lot of defensive linemen would be. And so I think you got to look at the depth pieces on the defensive line in this free agency class. I think you need to look at corner. I know Matty and I don't agree necessarily there, but I also think you need to look at the safety position and upgrading over Kareem Jackson. As weird as that sounds to say, I'm going to go with unpopular take there. I think there's younger guys who could do as well or better for the long term than Kareem Jackson could, you know, and I love Kareem Jackson. I loved that signing. I wanted that signing. But now here we are. He's got 1 year left on his deal. It's an expensive year. It's roughly $13 million or 12.887 something. And with that, he's got a high cap hit and a low dead money, you know, count, which to me, if you've got the opportunity to go get a guy like John Johnson and pair him up with his college teammate Justin Simmons, that's fun to me, and that to me looks like a more of a long-term move. So I like that kind of thinking for the Broncos in free agency, and this edge class, frankly, is very deep. So if the Broncos are going to move on from Von Miller, which again, like Shelby Harris, that deal has not been done at this point. So you kind of start to question, okay, I mean, the deadline hasn't passed by any means, but there's some edge players out there that you could throw some money at, and I don't know what the Broncos are looking to do there. I'd rather keep Von Miller because he's Von Miller, you know, he's a team legend, whereas guys like Kareem Jackson, Shelby Harris, they haven't been, you know, they're not that emotionally tied to the team compared to Von. So defense, man, defense. Pay those guys their money.
And to that Miller point, just really quick, I wanted to tag on that. If the Broncos do let Miller go, I think you'd much rather attack this veteran edge market with guys like Shaq Barrett, Bud Dupree, you know, even Trey Hendrickson or whatnot, though I don't know if the scheme fits there. But I'd much rather attack this veteran edge market to give me a solid or even high-level starter next season, and then draft a dev guy in the draft rather than sign an insurance guy and then draft, you know, Kwity Paye or Azeez Ojulari in the first round. I would much rather attack the veteran edge market than the rookie edge market.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Matty.
So a lot of people are going to want us to sign people right away and get those day one, wave A, wave one, whatever type of players. But really, if you take a step back and you look at the market, the value is going to be had on those guys, you know, those second tier, third tier guys that you're able to get on much cheaper deals that may either bet on themselves, sure, like I think a lot of these guys are going to do, or they're gonna say, look, I just want to take the money while I know I can get it because injuries happen in this league. Give me as much guaranteed money as you can possibly give me. So, I mean, if we move on, like, yes, would I love Shaq Barrett? Absolutely. Is he going to cost a lot of money? Yes, absolutely. Like, we're looking at potentially moving on from Vaughn, right? Well, what do we think Shaq's going to get per year? 22, 23 million, right? Somewhere in there.
I believe I was reading an article today that said it was projected probably about 4 years and 74 million, I believe, was one of the sites as far as projection. I mean, that would be putting it up close to that 20 million a year.
So, like, I mean, but like that's great if you can afford him. Like the Colts can definitely afford a guy like that, right? The Jaguars could afford a guy like that.
Clearly, the Buccaneers could now with the massage of the cap that Tom Brady did once again.
And then Mahomes is like, wait, hold my beer. So like, it's really funny watching the gymnast. Yeah, he didn't He's still making the same amount of money. Hold on. I'm going to get on a soapbox for just like 2 seconds. These quarterbacks aren't taking less money. They're getting more guaranteed money like right now. Like they're getting the check written to them right now as a signing bonus versus like a roster bonus or any other incentive bonuses or whatever later on down the line. They're getting their money. It's not like Tom Brady's taking less money. He's just saying no.
He's helping the team, though. I mean, like, he's helping the team.
Yeah. Oh, man. I wish I could help a team by writing my signature down next to something and I get paid like today. Like, I could use that money to, like, buy Uber Eats today. But never mind. Like, they're still getting their money. It's not like they're taking a pay cut. They're kicking the can down the road. Stephen Chris, he's part of Predominantly Orange. He can get into that, too.
He's supposed to be on tonight as like a surprise guest, by the way. He was supposed to be a surprise guest. He unfortunately couldn't make it. So I say all that because like some of these guys, like I'm scrolling down here just on NFL.com because that's what everybody looks at, right? John Johnson, the 24th ranked safety. If he doesn't get signed day one, like maybe he's getting $8-9 million a year, right? Which is a lot less than what Jackson's going to be getting. Shelby Harris is all the way down to 28. Like, what do we think he gets? $8 million a year, right? Maybe 8. Maybe. I'm thinking like three for 24 with like 18 to 20 guaranteed, something like that.
Yeah, I might even
throw a club option in there.
I might even be out on that. Honestly, I don't know. He's going to be 30 this year. Like, do you pay that guy on a 3-year deal? Do you give him that much guaranteed cash, I mean, I don't know.
Or do you utilize a club option at that point? I mean, like, do you throw in, say, a 3-year deal, but do you say 2 years with a club option? I mean, like, I feel like with Shelby's age, you could probably be flexible enough to maybe have it be 3 years, but say it's 2 years with a club option. I think you could be flexible maybe at that point if they wanted to go that route.
So while we're talking about edge, this is how stupid the edge market is. Bud Dupree is 28. He's ranked 4th. Jadeveon Clowney's 28. He was ranked 8th. But what about this guy Ngakoue? He might actually get kind of lost in the shuffle initially. You might be able to get that guy for like a 20% discount, 25%.
Maybe another
discount.
1-year deal.
Yeah,
maybe a one-year prove it deal, and then you can re-sign him when the cap goes up. What some people have said, 30 to 40 million potentially next year when the new TV deals kick in.
And there's so many good edge guys like Bud Dupree, Trey Hendrickson, Carl Lawson. Like the edge market's the best of the bunch, even if all of them don't hit. Like you said, Yannick Ngakoue, Romeo Okwara. Like there are guys all the way down the board. Even like if you want to take a flyer on a Hassan Reddick type, who I loved coming out of Pitt and all the reports around him. Maybe he goes to Matt Rule and they get him sorted out. But like Carlos Dunlap, who the Seahawks added as a veteran, I think he's better in a 4-3, but he came in and provided them a pass rush when they previously had none. Like of all the positions in this year's free agent class, I think edge is strongest. And I think there's also like, I don't think the top end talent is there with cornerback, but I think there's a lot of guys I'd be happy to add into Vic Fangio's scheme. And I know they're going to give me like solid starting level play. Maybe they're not superstars, but they'll make that what currently appears to be a major hole in the roster and a huge problem area into something more manageable.
And I think to Matty, your point, Matty, I mean, Ngakoue, I don't want to give too much credit to him because I don't know what role he played in it, but I mean, who just traded for him last year, right? I mean, the Minnesota Vikings did. So I don't know what factor George Paton played in that, but obviously, he and Rick Spielman probably had at least a discussion about it before Rick Spielman pulled the trigger on sending a second-round pick to the Jaguars for him. So that there's an interesting connection there that I think you could make and say, hey, maybe he really likes him a lot.
I really think he's our Vaughn insurance. If we don't get a deal done with Vaughn, he's the one guy I've got circled to be a replacement on the edge for us because of that reason. One of the key things that I'm kind of looking into where you could potentially fill a lot of holes is this 1-year deal conundrum, because it's like, what was it last year?
Denver had a little bit under the 30 million, right? I mean, like they had like something like 20 some million in cash pay, and they ended up getting 5 guys, like not the restaurant.
They got a hamburger.
They got not the restaurant, but didn't they sign like 5 guys or something? Like I believe it was Jeff Hireman. Well, they got
Vanette.
They got Nick Vanette. They got Melvin Gordon. They signed Graham Glasgow. They traded for H.J. Bouye, and they traded
for Casey.
And traded for Casey. So that's what, 5 guys? 6? I mean, so the Broncos, I think, are going to be in an interesting spot to where, and Payton talked about it, like, and it's been something that's been, say, maybe it's an overall NFL team MO, but to get all your needs filled before the draft, so you have nothing to worry about, basically. So that going into the draft, you're basically going into it that you're guaranteed to take best player available. So that said, I very well could see the Broncos signing, another round of guys that's maybe just a tad bit more than, say, the 5 or 6 guys, maybe like, say, 7 or 8, just purely on 1-year deals. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, because you're going to be more focused on re-signing guys and getting extensions with, guys like Justin Simmons and maybe even Shelby Harris, and then picking up Vaughn's option. So, I mean, getting guys like a Yannick Ngakoue, even with Von Miller, I still think is a pretty tempting option. Like, even with Bradley Chubb still here and Vaughn, Yannick, still makes a lot of sense, even if Vaughn's here. So, yeah, I know. It's making me sad seeing that my, potential Justin Simmons extension post is impending. I know. I'm been crying about it for the past 2 years, should I say. But I don't know. I think that for the sake of that, it makes me wonder about, say, how many positions and how many type of position groups are they attack, because, obviously I know about my love interest with Levante David, but it's like that was not even going to happen in the slightest. And so at that point, I'm just like, do they go out and get Matt Milano? Well, obviously that ended up not happening. So I mean, at that particular point, do you go into the linebacker market? So I mean, like, I don't know. It's very interesting. So I kind of want to get your guys' quick thoughts too, as I was rattling on about the 1-year deals, but that I feel like could be a pretty big conundrum as far as, do they sign, say, 7 or 8 guys just purely, on 1-year deals, 1-year prove-it deals?
I think that might be the way to attack this free agent market. Like, there's not going to be, many teams spending and many teams with a meaningful amount of money. So your dollar is going to go further, especially with these players that aren't going to want to cash in this year. They might just want a 1-year prove-it deal and then move on to the next. And I mean, Sayre hit on it. They're focusing defense, and that, hey, we might not always want to give Fangio these lower level talent guys and just have them elevate lower level talent guys into, playing like average defenders. The point to that being, if you are a mid-level free agent looking to elevate your value on a 1-year prove-it deal, playing under Vic Fangio might be pretty attractive. He's going to put you in a position to succeed, where you could maybe capitalize on it financially next offseason. So I think there's definitely an argument for that, especially when you look at the areas of need. Like, Fangio is renowned for his work with linebackers, renowned for his work with cornerbacks. I think it makes a lot of sense.
And not to mention, too, just purely off of, say, the cap space that they have right now. I mean, the lower cap, with the $182 million. Obviously, it's a little bit more. It's not the $188 million that Brandon McManus had, suspected or whatnot. But I mean, it is rather low. So I mean, we very well, might see just a flurry, and it's not just the Broncos, but we may see a flurry of 1-year deals just purely because of the $182 million in cap.
Yeah, and I think that the interesting thing to me is like, okay, and I'm not a cap expert by any means. But,
we're not a Steven Kriz.
Yeah, we're not a Steven, but what I'm thinking is like, okay, you get a guy like Patrick Peterson or something who says, hey, I'm willing to play on a 1-year, $10 million deal. Well, $10 million is fairly reasonable for a starting cornerback in the NFL. But if you get a guy for 1 year, $10 million, typically 1-year deals are fully counted against the salary cap unless I misunderstood that along the way somehow. So typically the way you're able to get a low year one cap hit is to spread out a signing bonus over 2-3 years or add void years or whatever. So like these 1-year deals, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Patrick Peterson, but any 1-year contract that you sign with somebody, you say, okay, we're going to sign player X for 1 year, $6 million. Okay, well, all of a sudden that's a 20% of your salary cap space or your available space. And so then you're having to be even more flexible. So to me, I like the idea of getting guys on 1-year deals if it comes at a low number. But if you're talking about allocating like $7 million here, $8 million here, and then all of a sudden your cap space is gone, that's not as attractive to me as potentially going after a guy like we did with, Jawan James back in 2019. Obviously hasn't worked out, but his year one cap hit was like $6 million. So it's stuff like that to where you can kind of have that be, you can kind of have that be something in this year where the cap is lower. It's a lower percentage of your salary cap that's getting taken up by doing multi-year deals whereas these players are going to want to cash in free agency. But I think that somebody tweeted out that 2023 is when they think that the cap is going to explode. So I think maybe as opposed to 1-year deals, you might see 2-year deals, because next year the cap might just go back up to what it was this past year, at 200 or 198, whatever it was. But the year after that, it could explode up with this new TV deal to 215 plus or 220 plus. And then all of a sudden these guys who, they signed 1-year deals this year and then they signed multi-year deals next year, they're like, oh, dang, we're not getting as big of a slice of the pie because we signed a 1-year deal in 2021 and then we signed a multi-year deal in 2022, and we didn't have the foresight to be able to see how this TV deal was going to impact the salary cap beyond 2022. So then they're kind of stuck in that being their only big contract, which is, I think the 1-year thing benefits teams like you mentioned, Colts, Jaguars, who else is up there this year? Patriots, teams like that. Jets, teams like that who can say, oh yeah, we'll pay you a crap ton of money on a 1-year contract to come and rebuild our roster. And then, just like any other team that happens to, then those guys leave. So
a point on that to consider as well. They'd be willing to do that for players if they think that those players would be able to re-sign for big money later on, because that gets them compensatory picks the following year. So it may hurt their formula for the 2022 draft, but the 2023 draft, that's where you could start seeing a lot of the 1-year deals signed this offseason pay off. That's one thing to really consider. And something else for Broncos country, 2023 is when, one way or another, we're going to have to be paying a quarterback top dollar, right? So
we hope.
For one, there are 2 quarterbacks on the market, potentially 2 on the market that are already under contract for that time. That might end up looking like bargains by then. Or if Drew Lock is the guy, then we start paying him by then, but we get this big boost in cap and we're good to go. So I don't see Peyton doing anything that's going to jeopardize our ability to lock up the quarterback position in 2023. That's a great point, Sayre, that I haven't really heard anybody bring up. Is people are looking at 2022, but 2023 really is like where a lot of the decisions that are made today, like that's what's going to be the most impacted. So good point there, Sayre. And also Zach for recognizing that too in our chat here for the pod.
Well, yeah, just sorry on that 1-year cap stuff. That's a great point I didn't consider when I was making my argument, and Sayre's dead on. The Broncos probably don't, even though they have more cap space than some teams. And I think they can use that philosophy on here's a guy we haven't been doing predictions. We've kind of been talking about free agency, but one guy I had as a prediction was maybe a Malcolm Butler signing. Wasn't great in Tennessee, which was very man heavy, but in New England's more hybrid defense, he thrived. Kind of that. He's a very intelligent player. He's a very competitive player. As a guy, maybe you could throw on a 1-year prove it deal worth $5-6 million. I love that in Vic Fangio's scheme. He can come in, or Matty just put in here in our chat as well, 2 for like 15.5, 10 guaranteed. Yeah, that way you can spread out the cap hit or whatnot. That's an awesome deal. And that's why I think cornerback's not that big of a need, because you sign one guy like that, which you still will have a good deal of cap space to work with after such a signing. You've got Callahan, who played was healthy for 16 games. He's a maybe second team All-Pro. He played at an absurdly high level. You've got Ojemudia, who was one of the better rookie corners last year. Like, yes, he had his ups and downs, but I feel confident in a year 2 leap. And then a guy like Butler, you're okay. And then Duke Dawson and Asang Bassi and Devontae Bowsby and Parnell Motley providing depth behind those guys. That's a fine cornerback room in Vic Fangio's scheme. It's not one of the best ones in the league. You might get torched sometimes in the AFC West, but you can go into a season and have that be functional. And that's not even considering or factoring in a mid-round pick, let alone a first-round pick like a Farley or a Horn or fill in the blank. That just circles back to the cornerback not being that big of a need point.
And I think what's interesting, too, is one of you brought up the point earlier about Fangio's defensive scheme really spreading around the league. And I think that's going to continually happen more and more. And it's not necessarily just Fangio disciples that are going to be spreading around the league, but it's going to be people who watch what his defense has been doing. Because dating back to before he even signed on with the Broncos, you remember it was his performance in that playoff game against I believe it was the Rams, or it was a game against the Rams and McVay at some point where he really stuffed them. He stuffed them up pretty good. And it was even in a defeat, it was like, wow, like what just happened? Like they just ran into this brick wall. Right. And Fangio's defense has put together some of the most impressive performances against top flight quarterbacks in recent years. And his iterations of his defense, look at Brandon Staley, his defense in LA with a motley crew of guys out there, a number of which are going to be very coveted free agents this year. You've got guys that are spreading this around the league and showing that this is an effective defensive scheme against the best of the best. Patrick Mahomes arguably played 2 of his worst games in his, since he's been in the league in 2017, I would say it's probably 2 of the worst games that he's played against Vic Fangio's defense this past year. And that is spreading around the league. And so you get guys to circle back. You get these guys who are free agents in 2021. If they're interested in cashing in 2022 or 2023, they're going to put some things on tape in the Fangio defense, the actual Fangio defense, and say, look, here's what I can do in the Fangio defense, and I'm going to be able to do that in many different types of schemes all across the NFL. So what I bring to the table is going to be coveted because I've proven that I can play in this defense that you now want to use, and I can play multiple roles in this defense that you now want to use. So, yeah, look what I can do. I'm a hypoglycemic and hyperactive. I love that skit. But that's kind of what I think, is that these guys are going to be able to get into the Fangio defense and say, hey, look, this is what I bring to the table. And I think that's going to be valuable to the players. I've talked about that with Trubisky on the other side, which is another free agency priority, QB. But I think anybody who's looking to play quarterback, in the next 2 years, who's looking to be a full-time starter, should look at our situation and be like, dang, like, that's actually pretty good. Like, Drew Lock hasn't stayed healthy his first 2 years in the league. There's no solidified starter there. Like, I could actually go win that job, and I could play well. I'm going to have a good defense behind me. I've got the best, in my opinion, in Sayre's opinion, the best playmakers on paper in the entire NFL. I've got a really good offensive line. So quarterback's another area.
The best in the AFC. Yeah, the best in the AFC West now.
Best in the West, baby. So, at QB, I think, That's a great question, Matty. At QB, my personal want in free agency is for the next possible Tannehill reclamation project. So I go in Trubisky, and I think that fit just makes a lot of sense to me, just based on, not that Fangio coached him, but he has history working in the same building as Vic Fangio. Fangio knows him probably personally pretty well. And I just think, obviously, George Paton has watched him play quite a bit. And I think when the Titans traded for Ryan Tannehill, nobody was like, "Oh wow, genius move by the Titans." That's going to pay huge dividends for them. But it was like, Marcus Mariota was in the same boat that Drew Lock is in. It's like, yeah, Marcus has shown us legitimately, he's shown he can make the Pro Bowl. And now we're at a point where, like, we don't know what we've got. And so we've got to bring in another guy in Tannehill, who's like, this guy has legitimately showed he could, be a weapon at the quarterback position. But now nobody really knows. Like, is he going to be able to stay healthy? Is he going to live up to his first-round status? And Trubisky, to me, is a guy who is young enough at this point that you could actually say, yeah, that upside is still there. Like, how many second overall picks become available? Yeah, did he play wide receiver? He might have. He only played 1 year in college, so. But it's another one of those things where it's just like that projection from college to the NFL. Like, Trubisky has had moments of success. Fangio has literally been to the playoffs on teams with Mitch Trubisky at the QB. So it's not like it's unprecedented, and Trubisky's been there 2 times himself. So I think that's the best fit to me. You bring in a guy like that who's got upside, he's got youth, he's got playoff starting experience, and I like that the best.
Go ahead, Zach.
I want to pitch my better court because I like the Trubisky thing too. I love the like, if we're rolling with Locke, I love the idea of adding in a Trubisky or a Darnold and going like, let's maximize our chances. Let's get another young guy in here. The guy I'm pounding the table for is Fitzpatrick, because I think it can be a very interesting fit with the Broncos. You look at I want them to draft a guy. I think I've made that clear, but let's say it's Fields. Getting a guy like Fitzpatrick, you can start him when he's like the best young quarterback mentor in the league. Like, he was built for that role. And then he's also looking for a starting job. So you could maybe be like, hey, we'll let you be the week 1 starter and go however long you can until until the young quarterback eventually takes your job. But yeah, that would be my dream scenario. What's yours, Matty?
Pitter patter, Matty. Let's get at her.
No, I'm sorry, Zach, for rushing you off. So we got this little chat thing here, and I'm just being a smart ass on the sidelines and getting everyone distracted. Look, I've been on the Fitz train for a long time, as far as like the guy that I wanted to be our veteran quarterback signing. And when Benjamin Albright, I will say friend of the pod, said that basically like he wasn't on our radar, like I kind of cried myself to sleep a little bit at night. Give me the guy with a glorious beard that can throw a dime and cover 2, looking through his ear hole.
Oh, so Gardner
against
Minshew.
The Raiders. Like, give me that guy, right? I want the dude that's going to be a gamer, that's going to do whatever it takes to win.
Oh,
Look,
so Gardner Minshew.
If Flores and company weren't so set on making themselves right about drafting Tua, the Miami Dolphins would have made the playoffs last year. The Miami Dolphins might have even won a playoff game. Like, that team looked good when they were rolling with Fitz. Fitz magic was alive and well in South Beach, and they went and just completely messed it up because they had to get Tua some playing time, and they had to make themselves right about their high first-round investment in the quarterback from Alabama. Like, I think Fitz got the raw end of the deal. He was so invested in the team, and they were so invested in him. This dude is a guy who's a fiery guy, but he's not somebody that you would think would cry or like get super emotional about things. Like, he would just be like, well, whatever, I'll roll with whatever. He was emotionally invested in that team. When they told him that he was stepping down, and they had a 5-1 record. They had a really good record at the time when he had to step down, they were gonna start Tua. Like, this dude was broken. He was rocked to his core. this is a guy who's always been a gunslinger doing it his own way. And it seemed like he was really like honing stuff in and playing his best ball at what, 36, 37 years old? Give me that guy with our offensive weapons, right? Yeah. And look, if he can't beat out Drew Lock, if Drew Lock is that good, during training camp, then more power to Drew. But if you want real competition for Drew Lock, that's the guy you bring in. The guy coming off potentially his best year as a pro, who should have led his team to a playoff appearance and really could have challenged the Buffalo Bills for that division. Like, give me that guy going up against the Patrick Mahomeses and, the Justin Herberts. I guess I'll throw Carr in there too. Maybe if you think he's a top 15 quarterback, whatever. But like Fitz, he gives you a chance to win any game. He could lose it for you too, but he gives you a chance to win every single game. That's the guy I want.
He understands his role. I mean, I think that's like the most important thing. And whether that's, for maybe him as a backup, I mean, like he understands his role. And I think that's the most important thing. So as far as now kind of going through this whole predicting cycle, we'll run through obviously the top position, should I say, where I guess I'll start it off and I will say that the Broncos will make a swing trade, and the fax machine will work on this one. But I mean, now, as far as the trade, I will say that they will acquire Darnold. I will actually say that they acquired Darnold. And I just think that, if they're really serious about adding competition, then Sam Darnold would be the way to go. I can't exactly speculate exactly what that deal would be, but I say they get Darnold. And as far as, say, the free agent market, I believe we do get a corner. I also feel like the Broncos will be doing more of a emphasis of signing their own guys. And I think if George Paton was to really set a huge tone for the draft and develop, or just setting a huge tone for just him as a general manager, it would be really smart. And it's going to sound costly, but it would be really smart to re-sign Justin, pick up Von Miller's option, and re-sign Shelby all in 1 year. If you are going to truly set a tone and that you are going to keep your own guys, that's the best way to do it. And I think that as far as just signing their own guys, I think they re-sign and pick up Von Miller's option. So I think that that's the way that they do it. I think that they just re-sign and pick up the option for Von Miller. And then on the flip side, I think that Xavier Rhodes is a guy that is one of those guys that may end up being a 1-year deal. He had a lot of work with Minnesota. He had a resurrected career with the Indianapolis Colts that I think that with that familiarity, the roads closed, may actually open, and I think it may actually end up coming to Denver. So I think that Xavier Rhodes is potentially one of those guys, and I do believe that they do take a flyer still on a younger guy at corner. I don't know who that will be, but I'll call my shot and I will say Desmond King for the for the Broncos. So I will say they will sign Desmond King and Xavier Rhodes, and then they will go out and they'll sign an edge guy for a 1-year deal. I can't exactly say who, but I mean I have a feeling they'll sign an edge guy for a 1-year deal.
I like it. You're gonna set the Paton, the George Paton free agency, baby. You sign that Hawkeye. Finally get a Hawkeye mention in this pod. I mean, my goodness, over 100 minutes in, and the Hawkeyes. I feel like we just haven't given them quite the love. But I know Cam. I know. It hasn't been that long since the day after Thanksgiving, the latest beatdown. But I love that you picked Desmond King. He's one of my guys. I love that. I'd love to see that.
What's the difference, by the way? Because obviously, I had mentioned that Josh Jackson is a trade possible. What's the difference between the two players? I mean, like, because in reality, the only thing that was different between the two of them was special teams versatility, right? I mean, with Desmond King, because King was the one that offered for versatility. And then you had Joshua Jackson, who's the gamer. And I think that a lot of people forget that Jackson had like 5 straight games of an interception or 2 in games back when he was in Iowa.
Yeah, he was a 1-year wonder kind of player for Iowa. Really, really busted out in that I believe it was 2017 season maybe. I have to go back and check, but in the 2017 season, he had just ridiculous production, 8 interceptions, a couple, or at least one of them coming against Ohio State when Ohio State was supposed to be just bonkers good as a team. But he made some big plays, and Noah Fant obviously on that team as well. So just balling out. So, but yeah, Desmond King was more consistent for Iowa. A 4-year guy who really did, or at least three or 4, I can't remember at this point. But yeah, he played extremely well as a kickoff returner, punt returner. I think there was even a couple times they threw him on the offense just to see if he could do something out there. So, but obviously didn't test super well. And then people were wondering, well, is Desmond King going to be a safety at the next level, or what is he? And he's ended up finding a pretty decent role as a nickel. And so I think he could do well in that in Fangio's defense for sure.
So I do think that we'll try to get Harris, and we're definitely going to get Simmons done soon, and I think we're going to try to get Miller done. But I'm going to do the devil's advocate thing. I'm going to say that, maybe like Jackson, we're not able to get figured out. I think Anthony Harris makes a lot of sense there. Maybe even on a 1-year deal and in an elevated role.
I'll say this, though, because you had mentioned his name in the chat. How much are you signing him to? Because based on all accounts, he is the best safety on the market. So, I mean,
well, with the regressed cap, you can look at that, but you can't compare it to other years' caps. I would say you can get him anywhere from maybe 1 for $9, which is still a discount for what we're getting, or what it would cost us to have Jackson. Maybe a 3 for $30 with like guaranteed money, something like that. If he wants
basically Kareem Jackson's deal.
But it's going to be a less of a hit now. But Kareem Jackson is much higher than $10 million a year right now. So I think that Harris makes a lot of sense there. As far as a move on, I mentioned Ngakoue in case that we lose Von Miller. And then here's another one. This is the one guy that I've got circled as a cornerback signing for us that I think we can maybe get for like 1 for 4.5, maybe 2 for 10, something like 7 guaranteed. Chidobe Awuzie. He's a guy who's shown flashes of being really good. Obviously, people in Broncos country region know a lot about him, but he's somebody that's kind of underperformed where they thought he was going to be. Maybe getting into Fangio's system, getting Fangio's hands on him will kind of allow him to flip the script, and maybe he can go get a bigger deal in 2022 or 2023, depending on the length of the contract he would sign with us. But I think he's a guy that we could definitely get in that wave 2 or potentially wave 3 of signings at a much more reasonable deal than say what Patrick Peterson would cost us. And honestly, I don't think that Peterson's production will be that much greater overall than what Awuzie would be. Obviously, like Kevin King is a guy that we could be looking at too. Sayre, what do you got on Kevin King?
I just like the potential of buy low on a guy like that after, obviously anytime you mention his name on Twitter, people are like, oh no, Kevin King sucks. Didn't you see him get burned in the playoffs? And it's like, well, yeah, but the guy is like 26 years old and he had a 5 interception season just in 2019. So, I think we can chalk up a lot of weird things happening in 2020. Maybe not being the new, like, okay, yeah, this is exactly if he took a step back anyway, as long as we don't play Scotty Miller, we good. Yeah, the Buckets were on the schedule in 2020, so we good. But I think Kevin King, like Zach's been mentioning, the Fangio defense is so favorable to corners, and then you bring in a guy who's worked with Kevin King, who was, I mean, a legit borderline sub 4'4" guy coming out of Washington at 6'2", 6'3", really good potential to play off and break on the ball, and then be a downfield guy as well. Understanding that you have help where needed, so I could be sold on Kevin King pretty easily, I'd say.
Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
Oh, I just think, yeah, to Sayre's point, some of that we keep seeing the playoff stuff pointed back to, and it's just like so overrated. Like that was all on his defensive staff putting him in a bad situation. You know, a player much faster than him, and he had no help over the top on an end of the half Hail Mary. Like that's not on Kevin King. That's on Mike Pettin. And to your point, Fangio is going to elevate Kevin King much more than Mike Pettin has. So I think the Broncos can afford to take a shot on, you know, a guy I mentioned, Malcolm Butler, or Matty mentioned Chidobe Awuzie, or Sayre mentioned Kevin King, Josh Jackson as well, even Desmond King, guys that have not, take a ride on the Fangio elevator. I love that. These guys that have talent that maybe haven't worked out elsewhere, give them to Vic Fangio and let them or let him maybe help them finally realize their potential.
Yeah, and Matty just posed the question as far as a hard line round robin, as far as Simmons, Harris, and Miller. Matty, right? You potentially asking that?
Yeah, so I think that Simmons gets done. I think that Miller gets done. And right now, my gut tells me Harris probably is going to think he can get more on the market. And he might be right. So I think we get 2 out of the 3 back.
So I guess what would your overall prediction? I don't think we got it from you, Zach. What would your overall prediction be as far as corners? If you were to pinpoint, you know, where they go or what they do and predict it, what would it be?
You know, I think they're going to target someone like a Malcolm Butler. You know, if I have to throw a name on it, I'll go with that just to be different. I saw he was released, and I really like that fit. An alternative guy I like is Mike Hilton. You know, I don't know if I don't know. I really like him as just like a decent level cornerback that I know is going to be solid. I wonder about the fit with Fangio, but I don't think it's necessarily too awkward. I think, again, Fangio's scheme is so cornerback friendly. I think a lot of guys can succeed in it. So I'll go that way there. And then overall, I think for the Broncos, it's all about kind of what you guys have been saying, bringing those guys back. If you let Shelby Harris walk, it puts you in a really bad spot on the defensive line. So I think you really want to bring him back. But if I'm being honest, with my prediction, I don't think they'll bring him back. I think between bringing Vaughn back, a little more expensive than maybe they thought pre-J.J. Watt deal, and then Justin Simmons, you know, having to get franchise tagged, you know, maybe they get that deal done, but it might be after free agency, so that might not help them out in terms of the cap there. I don't know. That's something to watch for me. I really think so. I think Vaughn's back. I think Simmons is back, but I think that means they end up sacrificing Harris. Cornerback, I think they'll go Malcolm Butler. And then to replace Harris, I think they'll have to add someone on the defensive line. Maybe someone not super flashy. I saw, K-Jax. Yeah, I think they'll bring K-Jax back. I'm trying to think of a non-flashy defensive line. Maybe Sheldon Rankins or Malcolm Brown, the Saints guys that have been cut free. Daquan Jones from the Titans is also available. If they want to go with more of a pass rush, Larry Ogunjobi flashed early in his career and then kind of tapered off with the Browns. A veterans ad, if they wanted to go for it, might be like Ndamukong Suh. You know, they're a good.
To what? Did you say Ndamukong Suh?
Oh wait, that's right. He goes to that school that gets whooped up on by CU.
That's right.
Pass on that. Let's move to the next one on the list.
Yeah. You know,
and Derek Wolfe maybe for a reunion. Sorry.
Yeah. I think that the other question, and it's going to be a big one, is what happens with Philip Lindsay. I think that that's going to be the big one, at least one of the big ones. And real quick, as we round it all out, where do we stand? I mean, there's rumblings that they're going to throw in a original round tender on Phillip, and that may not end up sit well to where, they end up going elsewhere, or Lindsey ends up going elsewhere. And to that point, he may end up going to a team like a San Francisco or an Arizona, teams that could better utilize that type of skill set. So where exactly are we officially, should we say, on Phillip Lindsey? Because if you were to tell me 2 or 3 months ago that Phillip Lindsey would still be a Denver Bronco, I would agree with you. But lately, it certainly seems in the last few weeks, things have turned rather fast and quickly to maybe his time in Denver may be coming to a close.
I just wonder, what's the point of it? What's the point of the original round tender on Phillip Lindsey? You do the original round tender, and you're going to tick him off, first and foremost. Second of all, you're going to tick his whole family off. Third of all, you're going to tempt other teams to come and sign him with no compensation required in return. So all they have to do is write him up an offer sheet that says, hey, you're not going to sign him to this, right? And the Broncos would have the right to refusal, right, Matty? And they would be able to say, oh, no, we'll sign him at that price. Which, are they going to do that? If they're willing to do that, why wouldn't they just give him the second round tender, which is only $1 million more? So, or why wouldn't they just re-sign him on their own and write the deal themselves? Because there's precedence for a contract out there. You could go Tariq Cohen, Austin Eckler. You could look at those contracts and say, okay, Phillip Lindsey's performed comparably in his first 3 seasons. I mean, maybe not obviously in terms of his exact role, but I mean in terms of production. So I just think that there's no point in the original round tender for Phillip Lindsey. I think unless you're saying, all right, we're just gonna trade him. If that's even possible. Another team could say, screw that, we're not trading for him, we're gonna sign him. But if it gives you leverage to trade him on that 1-year contract, and you could say, all right, yeah, we'll trade him for 1 year. I don't know exactly what that would be, but there are other options out there. So if the Broncos don't like Phillip Lindsey's fit in their offense, then they need to move on. And they need to get somebody who does fit in the offense. And I think that's going to come, that could come through free agency, as Matty's dropping some names, Duke Johnson, James White. But I would just say, if you want Phillip Lindsey part of your offense, give him the second round tender. If you don't, let him go, because you're not getting anything back for him anyways. And if you let him go as unrestricted, at least you have an opportunity to get a compensatory pick. And actually, that thought hadn't occurred to me, so I'm not exactly sure that that's how it works. But if they let him go, I don't know if that means he reverts to being unrestricted, or if it just means that I don't know exactly how that would work. I've never really seen that happen before. So
and not to mention the difference between the second round tender and the original tender, I believe is like 200 million or sorry, not 200 million, 200,000.
I think it's more than that.
It's about $1 million.
Like 1 or 2 million.
About $1 million. But yeah, what is it? 3 million for the second round tender, and then like 3.1, and then like 2.1 or something like that, maybe for the original round tender. So I mean,
and we've been here before. I'm sorry, do we not remember the horrible bungled situation that was C.J. Anderson, where Elway tried to get a little too cute and went, I know I can save this $1 million with an original round tender. Then Miami comes in and gave him an offer sheet. And then next thing you know, you're suckered into giving a long-term, much more expensive deal. Then a 1-year, $3 million deal for Phillip Lindsey is fine if you want him on the roster. And also, there's no reason you should be doing a running back extension earlier than you have to. Personally, I don't like the idea of paying running backs, but we've seen like Zeke Elliott and the Cowboys, Todd Gurley and the Rams. I don't think there's any reason to get ahead of a running back extension, because they go downhill quick, especially when they have as much tread on the tires as Phil. And he's coming off some, injuries last season. So I think give him that tender, let him play on that deal next season. Like Sayre mentioned, it's $1 million and it makes Lindsey happy. The only reason you shouldn't give him the second round tender is if you're deciding to go elsewhere with the running back position. If you don't give him that second, if you go original round, I think you have to be comfortable with him walking because someone else is probably going to offer him. I'd say almost definitely. And if you match it, you've just cost yourself money by putting the original round tender up. So I think the only reason you do that is if you're comfortable with him leaving. And I mean, it does tie back to when Peyton invests in the running back position, he does it in the first 3 rounds. I think you can say it doesn't make sense to have Gordon at 7-8 million, somewhere in that range. I can't remember off the top of my head. Lindsey on that second round tender, and then a 3rd round draft pick also on the roster. I can understand the philosophy that, wow, that's a lot more invested in the running back position than I'd like. I'm going to let Lindsey walk and then go Gordon in a 3rd round pick and then let Gordon walk next year. Like that's understandable to me. But if you want Lindsey on the roster next season, I think you have to pick up that 2nd round tender.
Well, yeah. I mean, and it isn't just Lindsey for the tender that they got to worry about. Obviously, it's Tim Patrick as well. And we'll certainly see. I mean, it's going to be a fascinating watch for sure. It was exciting. We had a fantastic show. It was detailed from start to finish. I mean, very well might, Matty. I mean, go ahead and as far as TD, I mean, does TD carry a little bit away for you as far as
I've seen this get a little traction on social media. Look, I value Terrell Davis's opinion on the running back position and what he thinks. I do think he's a little emotional to the story of Lindsey, to the fact that Lindsey's wearing his number. I think like Terrell Davis isn't going to be able to look at this as objectively as, say, Peyton will, with fresh eyes, knowing what to pay running back. So I really think like Broncos country is a little more invested in Phillip Lindsay than, what potentially our front office will be. So for me, like Terrell Davis saying that about Lindsey, that's great. That makes me feel good about Lindsey as a person. And I hope that Lindsey secures the bag somewhere. I don't think it's going to be with us, and it doesn't impact how I want to roster build.
Yeah. So it's definitely going to be, a fascinating watch for sure. And free agency will be commencing, air quotes, on Monday. It'll be commencing on Monday with the aforementioned legal tampering period beginning on Monday.
So I see when I see legal tampering, I think legal tampering with like the quotes.
Yeah, like Austin Powers.
Dr. Evil saying laser beams. Are they ill-tempered, Seabass? Like
with sharks with freaking laser beams attached to their head.
It's legal activity. That's what legal tampering means to me. It's like legal arson or legal larceny. You know what I mean? Like it's just so funny, like legal tampering. We're either going to have tampering or we're not going to have tampering. Come on, NFL. Figure it out. Figure it out.
Wasn't it that the Broncos actually got news of Case Keenum, like, was it midnight Monday morning? Or it was something along the lines like something broke. I remember something along the lines like it didn't happen on free agency, but it happened on legal tampering where I believe Case Keenum to Denver was broken like midnight or something like that. Like the 1 year, like something big is going to happen at some shape or form, at least right around that midnight time frame.
Yeah, and that's the thing about the legal tampering window. Everyone, all the players and agents are really respectful of it. They're definitely not negotiating before that window. When you see those deals come across the bulletin, the moment the deadline opens, like within 1, 2, 3 minutes, those are just agents and teams being really fast in negotiations. No way they were negotiating before the legal tampering period opened. That'd be illegal. That'd be against the rules.
Rosenhaus is a stud, man.
Yeah. Man. Just to Matty's point, that's all happening at a time. And yeah, it kind of takes some of the oomph away from free agency because by the time free agency officially opens, we already know where most of the top guys are going. Like the first wave of free agency really happens before free agency even starts, weirdly.
Yeah. And I tell you, I'll further the Von Miller point because we had mentioned that he's going to stay, but this may not necessarily be a bold take as of right now. But I will say, as we're rounding it out, that my prediction is that that Von Miller's option will be picked up over the weekend. I think that they do end up picking Von Miller's option up during the weekend. That way, it's there. Whether they pick it up or decline it, I say we get news regarding the option this weekend. Whether they accept it or decline it, I think we get news regarding Von Miller's option this weekend.
If we decide to keep Kareem Jackson, all due respect to Kareem Jackson, if we decide to keep Kareem Jackson, Watson? Yeah, well, I don't know. If we decide to keep Kareem Jackson instead of Von Miller, I might lose it a little bit because, we have other ways to save money if that's what we're trying to do. So if they decide to keep other guys besides Von who are going to be gone next year anyway, I will have huge problems with that.
Huge.
The only way that really pays off is if we get Watson, right? Like if we're able to get Watson because K-Jack TV was able to bring Deshaun Watson to Denver.
Put him in the Ring of Fame immediately.
Is that more palatable for you, Sayre?
It maybe, yeah, but I just think man, if we're gonna get Deshaun, it's gonna be because we got Cortland, Judy, Fant, et cetera, Hamler, all those guys. That's gonna be why we get him. Not necessarily because of Kareem Jackson, who may or may not be there after this year anyway, but you never know.
Yeah. Well, as we said, from top to bottom, it was a pretty detailed pod, and obviously we touched on a lot of different things. And as always, as we round out the show, it's always still worth huge. As we round out the show, it's always worth asking, especially on a detailed pod like this, is there any final thoughts, gentlemen, as you guys like to say? Before we go Big Red.
Buy a Trey Lance rookie card. Buy a Trey Lance Broncos jersey.
Okay.
I don't know if I have anything else to add. I'm kidding. Yeah, I think that says it all right there. Buy the jersey, buy the cards, buy them all.
If he goes to the Falcons, though, in all seriousness, I would invest in a Trey Lance rookie card. That's the perfect landing spot.
For me, if Ronnie Perkins gets drafted by the Raiders, I'm going to buy a Ronnie Perkins jersey or buy a Ronnie Perkins Raiders jersey. Just for you, Matty.
I mean, that's your money. He's a great player. He's a great person.
I'm buying it, and I'm going to send it over to you.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, it might sit in the closet behind my other jersey. Hold on, 2 seconds.
Oh man,
it'll sit behind this one.
Yeah, but at least
my authentic Brock Osweiler jersey.
At least that one has a Super Bowl ring
during that season. So that's cute. Cam tried to get cute and attack me here at the end. But I think I still hold firm that I think Deshaun Watson is going to be our quarterback week 1 for Broncos country. Look, I'm seeing a lot of these other dominoes start falling, and really the Broncos, they can have a long-term plan, and they can start executing that long-term plan, and it doesn't take them out of the Watson sweepstakes. I really think that there are only 2 other teams that we got to worry about, and it's really the Jets and it's Miami. And it's what's the direction that those teams want to go and how much are they willing to pay for Watson. And I honestly think that Peyton and Fangio are going to get their guy, and then they're not going to have to question the quarterback position for a long time. So I called my shot a month and a half ago, and I stand by it.
He did call the correct Super Bowl. So I will say this, Sayre, we may be have to have another Chick-fil-A bet on our hands with Matty on this whole Deshaun Watson bet if it comes to fruition. Lou, one of our other writers, actually predicted that Carson Wentz would be traded to the Indianapolis Colts. and unfortunately we didn't buy it, and so Sayre ended up chipping in and the stuff for a Chick-fil-A bet. So we may have another Chick-fil-A bet on our hands with Matty if Deshaun Watson becomes a Denver Bronco.
It's a great company to invest in. So
it is a great company. It's better than Canes. I finally came to the conclusion it's way better than Canes. Well, gents, it was an amazing Mainly Broncos podcast episode. Make sure you follow Sayre Bedinger on Twitter at Sayre Bedinger, and to obviously bring it up again, he and I will be doing a little bit of a deep dive, potentially with some other writers too, over at Predominantly Orange. So he and I are going to be doing a deep dive in that, so make sure to check on that. And you got Mile High Sports, the now ever so famous Zach_Segars over there, the Trey Lance super fan. And then you got Bartholomew Mulls over there, who's looking at his phone and doing whatever. I don't know what he's doing.
He's shopping a Broncos jersey on the Ronnie Perkins.
Yeah, he's probably creating a Ronnie Perkins jersey for the Broncos right now, or let alone a Raiders J.C. Horn jersey or something like that. I don't know, but I mean, you can go follow that cuisine, I guess. Of a man, I guess, Matty Mulls at Matty Mulls Pod, who does terrific work with the Oklahoma City Thunder podcast called Topic Thunder. What, Matty?
I appreciate that. I'd rather get myself a personal colonoscopy than go and buy J.C. Horn or Ronnie Perkins Chiefs/Raiders jersey. So, miss me with all of that energy, please.
This has been another episode of the podcast that you guys can go over and check out at Mainly Broncos. I am Cameron Parker. You guys can follow me on Twitter at Cameron Parker PO. So thank you guys so much, and we will be back for another episode of the show.
Saddle up.